My sister wants to get married on the same day and at the same place as me to save costs, but I don't save anything by humiliating her, even when she wants to come to my honeymoon. Weddings are supposed to be happy moments, right? Well, for most people they are, but if you come from a broken family like mine, it can get very complicated. I'm 31 years old and I'm getting married in 2 months to the love of my life. We've been planning this day for over a year, and I was very excited because everything was coming together. I'm marrying a wonderful man, and my dad, who has always supported me, insisted on paying for most of the wedding. He wanted it to be a grand event in an elegant place, something really special. Everything was going well, but as it usually happens in my life, my mom found a way to complicate everything. Here comes the complicated part. My parents divorced when I was 5 years old. It wasn't a difficult divorce, legally, but it divided our lives in ways that no custody agreement could fix. My mom remarried a year later and had my half-sister Bernie, who is now 23, with her new husband. Even though my parents had joint custody, I spent most of my time with my dad. My relationship with my mom grew colder after she remarried, and it got worse when Bernie became the center of her attention. I didn't feel resentful about it. It simply became clear that my mom had moved on with her life, and I had become a secondary priority. Fast forward to now. I've been dating my fiancé for over 5 years, and we believe it's time to get married. I told my dad about our plans, and he was thrilled. He immediately offered to help us financially. I also told my mom, and she seemed happy at first, but after a while, things started to twist. 3 weeks ago, out of the blue, I received a call from her. We didn't usually talk much, so the call was already a surprise. I thought she wanted to catch up or maybe ask about the wedding, perhaps share in my excitement, but I was completely wrong. She started with an overly cheerful tone that I learned to identify as a sign that something bad is about to come. "Honey, I have good news. Guess what? Bernie is engaged." I was taken aback. I didn't even know she was seriously dating anyone. We weren't close, so I wasn't surprised not to have all the details, but the way my mom said it made it feel like it was already expected. I replied, "Oh, that's nice. What good news?" However, in the back of my mind, I was puzzled about why she was specifically calling to tell me that. After all, I didn't care if she was single or engaged. Then she paused for a few seconds, lowered her tone, and said, "Well, here's the thing. Bernie and her fiancé have a very tight budget. They can't afford a big wedding like yours, so we thought, what if Bernie and her fiancé get married on the same day as you? We could use the same place, just a few hours earlier, of course. Maybe Bernie could have a little ceremony in the morning, and then you could have yours in the afternoon. It would save us a lot of money and would be so special for both of you to share that day." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My mom was essentially asking me to share my wedding day with my half-sister, with whom I barely had a relationship. My mind couldn't process it. Without thinking twice, I replied, "No way! I'm not going to let this ruin my day. This is my wedding day, Mom. It's not a family reunion or a way to save money. I'm not sharing it with anyone, especially not with Bernie." "I'm sorry." Her optimistic tone faltered, but she insisted that Bernie and her fiancé really couldn't afford anything like mine. "You have to understand how hard this is for us, not being able to give her what she deserves. It's just borrowing the space for a few hours. They'd only use a corner of the big hall. It's not too much to ask." She tried to reason with me, arguing that they were going through tough times and that this would solve many of their problems. I told her, "I'm sorry, but the answer is no." She sighed deeply and changed the subject, but I knew that the conversation wasn't over, not by a long shot. In the following weeks, I was bombarded with calls and messages from my mom. She didn't give up. Every conversation was the same. Her begging me to let Bernie have her wedding on the same day, and me responding with a firm no. She started using every possible tactic, trying to emotionally manipulate me. First, she played the family card. "Wouldn't it be nice for you and Bernie to share such a special day? After all, she's your sister," I replied, "but we're not close, and I don't want to be." A long time ago, I accepted that Bernie and I wouldn't have a sisterly bond, and that was okay with me. Then she got angry and said, "Whose fault is it that you aren't close? You're the oldest. Did you ever try to get along with her? I said no, I didn't try, and I didn't want to. Then she tried to make me feel guilty. You and your dad have so much. Your wedding is going to be beautiful and expensive. Don't you think it's a bit selfish to keep all that for yourself when your sister and her fiancé are struggling to plan theirs? She doesn't even have a full-time job, and her fiancé can't afford an elegant wedding, and your stepdad can't help either. We are going through tough times. I was boiling with rage at that point, so I let her have it. First off, I'm not responsible for their finances. If she wants to get married without a stable job, that's her problem. How are they going to manage later if they can't afford a big wedding? Let them have a small one. But it's not fair for you to ask me to share my special day. Since then, I stopped responding to her calls and messages, even those where she tried to ask about my wedding preparations. I'm mentally exhausted by all of this. The truth is, I've put a lot of effort into rebuilding my relationship with my mom. As I mentioned before, she was absent for much of my childhood, and a part of me harbored resentment because she moved on with her life so quickly. A couple of years ago, I talked about this with my therapist, and with her help, I decided to work on the relationship with my mom, which helped me grow as a person. With this new episode, it feels like we're back to square one. Now, I truly don't know if I'm being selfish or just setting my boundaries. My mom assures me that Bernie's wedding won't interfere with mine at all, and that it will end before my guests arrive. Besides, it will be a small ceremony for them with fewer than 10 people. Update 1. Thanks for reaffirming my stance. You're right in saying that it takes 2 people to fix a relationship, and my mom's priorities are pretty clear. She doesn't care about my happiness, she only cares about fulfilling her golden child's wishes. Some people asked me why I'm so resentful toward my half-sister, what the story is behind it, and why she wants to get married at the same place as me. Let me explain these things one by one. Well, I admit I might have sounded bitter or maybe cold toward Bernie. The reason once again has to do with the trauma of my childhood. It pains me to tell this, but my parents divorced because my mom cheated on my dad with Bernie's dad. I was just 5 years old, but some memories are engraved clearly. I remember the day my dad left the house, and a few hours later, Bernie's dad came to our house. My mom locked herself in the room with him that night. I lay crying until I fell asleep. I don't remember how many days passed before my dad came to see me. When he did, I told him I wanted to live with him. At that time, he was temporarily staying with my grandparents, and he took me with him. My mom didn't oppose it. That was the only good thing she did for me. She visited me frequently and took me back to her house, but never forcefully. I loved my mom, and every time she asked me to go with her, I thought she would finally take care of me and love me like she used to. But that never happened. She was too busy being the perfect wife for her new husband, and soon she became pregnant with Bernie. I started spending more time living with my dad. I enjoyed being with him and my grandparents. Before long, my dad got his own house a block away from my grandparents' house. He eventually remarried, but that was not until I was in high school. I got along really well with his wife. I lived full-time with my grandparents during high school, and by the time I went to college, I had distanced myself completely from my mom. My dad paid for my schooling and helped me start my career. I've always had a close relationship with him, while my relationship with my mom has been, to put it mildly, less than ideal. We would text occasionally and see each other at family gatherings, but the emotional distance was evident. As for my resentment toward Bernie, well, I don't know how to explain it well. Bernie and I never had a sisterly bond. I was always treated like a stranger in that house that was originally mine. That house holds memories of my childhood with my parents, but it was usurped, so to speak, by Bernie and her dad. Honestly, I never tried to get close to Bernie and kept my distance. I don't know whose fault it is, but it's how things are now. As for why Bernie wants to get married at the same place as me, I have no idea why she thinks it's okay to ruin my wedding. I have no idea. However, Bernie has always been the kind of person who wants everything others have. I remember that every time she saw one of my new dresses, my dolls, or some other toy, she would pester her parents to get her the same thing. Unfortunately, her dad didn't earn enough, so most of the time she only got a cheap version of what I had. It's not that I wanted to brag, but that's how things were. So maybe upon learning that I would be getting married in this beautiful mansion by the lake, She wanted the same for her wedding. But poor thing couldn't afford it. Neither could her fiancé nor her dad, which is why they sent my mom to fulfill the mission. Now for the update. After I rejected my mom, she went behind my back and tried to manipulate my fiancé. Yes, she had the audacity to tell him the same sad story about Bernie's finances, begging him to let them use our venue for their wedding as a kindness. She even asked him to move our ceremony a little later, maybe in the afternoon, so Bernie could get married in the morning. She promised it would be something small, just with close family, assuring him that it wouldn't interfere with our wedding. My fiancé is an incredibly calm person. He listened to her, empathized with her, and said he would discuss it with me. I'm glad he knew his limits and didn't make the decision on his own. I was furious, but he calmed me down and said, "Look, it's your decision. This is your day, and if you don't want to share it, then we won't share it. I'll support whatever you decide." His words were exactly what I needed to hear. My mom tried to involve my fiancé in her plan, but I wasn't going to allow that. I was done being nice. I immediately called my mom and scolded her for what she did. I made it very clear that if she didn't stop playing dirty, I would uninvite her from my wedding and cut her out of my life. She cried and apologized, saying it was a mistake to contact my fiancé. She also promised to behave better from now on. The problem is, I didn't want her to apologize. I wanted her to say something horrible so I could uninvite her. After what she did, I don't want her at my wedding, but now that she has apologized, would I be the bad one if I still cut her off and banned her from my wedding despite her apology? Update 2. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, I received a desperate call from my aunt, who is usually the first to know about any family drama. Her first sentence was, "Have you seen Bernie's wedding invitation?" I was confused and replied, "No, I haven't received anything." Then she told me that Bernie had sent the invitation for the same date and place as my wedding, and people were already asking her if it was a joint ceremony. My mom had previously said that Bernie's wedding would be small, with fewer than 10 people. But according to my aunt, the invitation had already been sent to over 50 people along with their plus ones, and all of them were family and friends from our close circle. This meant that my mom's side of the family, who planned to attend my wedding, were now also invited to Bernie's. It was clear that Bernie wanted to ruin my wedding by celebrating hers first. I panicked. What the hell is going on? I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. Bernie had sent invitations to get married on the same day and at the same place as me without any agreement from me. I was furious. I drove straight to my aunt's house, picked up a printed copy of the invitation, and headed to my mom's house, seething with anger. I was so mad that I showed her the invitation and asked, "What's going on?" That was the trigger for my mom to start crying. She immediately got emotional and said, "I'm so sorry. Your stepdad and Bernie pressured me to convince you, but I didn't manage to get you to agree. Let's be clear." I sat there silently trying to process how she could have made such a huge promise behind my back, and it still wasn't over. She made a last desperate attempt. "Honey, now that the invitations have been sent, could you please consider it? Do it for me. I promised them this would happen. And if the wedding gets canceled now, the groom's family and other relatives will humiliate us." I could feel blood rushing to my face. I replied with all the coldness in the world. "I've told you time and again that I'm not going to share my wedding day with Bernie. If they already sent the invitations, that's their problem, not mine." My mother began crying even harder, but I didn't care anymore. I made it very clear that I was cutting her out of my life, and that she, Bernie, and her entire family were banned from my wedding. I was fed up with their games. That was 2 days ago, and since then, there has been total silence. All this drama has me on edge. This should be the best moment of my life, right? But here I am dealing with this completely unnecessary chaos. Update 3. I'm already married. Thank you so much for all your support. After the last confrontation with my mom, I decided to get my dad involved. I told him everything, and he assured me he would handle the situation. I also contacted the event venue to inform them of what was happening. I made it very clear that Bernie, my mom, and her husband were banned from even trying to enter the wedding, much less organize any event there. The venue confirmed that no one aside from my fiancé and I could make changes or reservations related to our wedding. The next few days were quiet. I imagined that my mom and Bernie were busy trying to cancel the invitations and fix the mess they had created. But a few days later, my mom showed up at my house. She looked exhausted and had tear-streaked cheeks as if she hadn't slept in days. As soon as I opened the door, she started yelling, "We're humiliated! Bernie had to cancel everything! People are asking why, and now we look like fools. Everyone knows we can't afford a decent wedding for Bernie. You've embarrassed us." Bernie is so distraught that she hasn't eaten in days. She and her father won't even talk to me. What did you gain by ruining my happiness? I crossed my arms and looked at her without feeling an ounce of compassion. I told you from the beginning that I wasn't going to share my wedding day. You ignored me, went behind my back, and tried to force this. This is your fault, not mine. And yes, now you only have one daughter, Bernie, because I'm cutting you out of my life. I don't want to continue this toxic relationship. Before she could respond, I slammed the door in her face. It wasn't a moment I felt particularly proud of, and I felt bad for banning her from my wedding, but I needed to set that boundary. I told everything to my dad, and he completely supported me. He even offered to cover the extra security costs if necessary. He's always been my biggest support, and this time was no different. The repercussions were swift and ugly. My mom even tried to involve my aunt in hopes of convincing me to let her attend, but I stood my ground. Despite all the drama, my wedding turned out perfect. I was surrounded by people who genuinely care about me. There was no stress or chaos, just love and happiness. My dad walked me down the aisle, and my husband and I exchanged our vows in front of our closest family and friends. It was everything I had always dreamed of. My mother's absence didn't even cross my mind that day. It was her loss, not mine. I know some people might think I was too harsh or that I should have found a middle ground, but after years of coldness and indifference from my mom, I wasn't willing to sacrifice my happiness to please her or anyone else. Bernie's wedding had to be completely canceled. They sent formal apology notes to the guests, citing unforeseen circumstances. I found out from my aunt that Bernie was devastated and furious with me. She blames me for everything, which honestly, I expected. She's upset because her dream of getting married in such an exclusive place has fallen apart. To her, it didn't matter that she overstepped by sending out invitations without my consent, or that they pressured me to accept something I clearly didn't want. From her perspective, I'm the one who ruined everything. Apparently, Bernie has stopped talking to anyone outside her closest circle. She's too ashamed to face her friends or extended family. The financial strain of canceling everything has hit them hard since she and her fiancé were already short on money. The losses from non-refundable deposits hit them hard. My aunt told me that Bernie has been painting me as the villain in this whole story. In her version, I'm the selfish sister who refused to share despite having everything while she has so little. But instead of respecting my boundaries, they tried to take advantage of me, and now they're facing the consequences. It's also been noted that this disaster has impacted the relationship between Bernie and her fiancé. From what I've heard, he was furious when everything blew up. Apparently, he didn't want to take advantage of my wedding from the start, but he was pressured by Bernie to do so. He thought it was a bad idea from the beginning and felt embarrassed when they had to cancel the wedding. My aunt hinted that things have become tense between them since then. Although they haven't officially broken up, it's evident that all this drama has caused serious problems in their relationship. I'm glad that Bernie's fiancé seems to be a sensible guy who understands that it's not right to try to appropriate someone else's special day. Update 4. I think I've already told you how Bernie has always been the typical girl who, when she sees someone with something, she wants it as well. So this new update probably won't surprise you at all. Recently, my mom found out that my husband and I were going on our honeymoon. Even though Bernie's wedding was completely canceled and therefore she won't have a honeymoon, she wanted me to take her on our trip to make up for all the damage I supposedly caused by ruining her wedding. Yes, you've read that right. Bernie, who barely has a relationship with me, thought the least I could do was invite her on my honeymoon. No joke. Of course, my mom didn't reach out to me directly since she's completely blocked on all possible forms of communication, phone, social media, email, everything. But my mom, without hesitation, decided to call my dad to convince him to persuade me. She boldly told him that the least I could do was take Bernie with me. According to my mom, this would be the fairest thing as some sort of compensation for ruining her dream day and her relationship. My dad, who has been my biggest supporter in all this craziness, directly responded that what she was asking for now was even more ridiculous than what she had asked before. He made it clear that he had no intention of convincing me to take Bernie on the honeymoon, and that the best thing my mom could do right now was to stop making such absurd requests. He told her something I thought was very right. If she really wanted to have any kind of relationship with me in the future, she should start treating me like her daughter and not as a resource for Bernie. He made it clear that this kind of behavior was just digging a deeper chasm between us. When my dad told me this, I couldn't help but laugh. The situation was so absurd that all I could do was take it humorously. Of course, I didn't give it much importance because I clearly wasn't going to take Bernie with me on the honeymoon. It was time for me and my husband, a moment we had planned to enjoy as newlyweds. I wasn't going to include anyone else, especially someone like Bernie. However, the story doesn't end there. Despite my dad's clear advice, my mom chose to ignore it. So on the day of our flight, my mom and Bernie showed up at the airport. Yes, they went to the airport. Thankfully, the airport is quite large, and my husband and I saw them before they saw us, so in a quick move, we managed to slip away without being seen. I'm sure they had no idea what our flight was or what time we were leaving. They must have been there waiting to ambush us, hoping we would allow them to join our trip. And it's not all. Bernie even brought a suitcase. That is to say, she was fully prepared to hop on that plane with us. Now ask yourself, if my mom and Bernie don't have much money, what did they think I was going to do? Buy last-minute plane tickets for them to join my honeymoon? That was yesterday. Today, we're at our destination enjoying our honeymoon, and all I hope is that my mom and Bernie had enough money to pay for a taxi back from the airport, because the last I heard of them was that they were there waiting as our plane took off. Thankfully, that's the only contact we've had with them so far. My husband and I are enjoying our trip the way it should be. Update 5. I'm back from my trip, and my husband and I were looking for my mom and my half-sister everywhere at the airport. During our honeymoon, we had an ongoing joke about the idea that my mom and Bernie might have moved to live at the airport, like in the movie, patiently waiting to ambush us when we returned, and thus take the chance to get a taxi back with us. Of course, to make up for everything we had done to them. But fortunately, they weren't there. Not that we expected them to be, but it made me laugh. Update 6. Do you want to know the latest thing that Bernie has tried with me? Well, not directly with me, but it's something that could clearly affect me. She tried to flirt with my husband. Yes, because Bernie always wants what others have, and this time she didn't just want any husband, she wanted mine. Somehow she got his number, I have no idea how, but she did. Obviously, she's now blocked on my husband's phone, but not without first receiving a response from me. First, she sent several messages trying to seduce him. They were the type like, well, if you get tired of Ope, you can always have a younger version. Or, I get the impression that Ope might be a bit boring in bed, something that doesn't happen with me. To top it off, she attached a couple of photos that, while not completely naked, were quite provocative. Obviously, my husband didn't respond to any of those messages, but I did. My response was direct. Hi, Bernie, I'm your sister. Your plan didn't work, but I think I know where you went wrong. The photos were a bit ugly. Next time you try to seduce someone else's husband, especially your sister's, at least spend a few months at the gym because you're a little bit overweight. I know I was cruel with my response, and I understand that mocking someone's weight is not right. I don't take pride in resorting to that, but this woman has brought out the worst in me. I felt hurt and betrayed by what she was trying to do, and for a moment, I simply let the anger speak. I'm sure some people will call me the bad one for this, and I accept that. But I'm not going to deny that I felt good doing it at that moment. Bernie has crossed boundaries I never thought would be crossed, and this is just another proof of how harmful and manipulative she can be. Even if I regret being so harsh in my response, I also think you have to hit back when someone strikes.